She was forced to serve the Alpha King, until his wolf recognized her as his long-lost mate now. Elena Voss had never wanted a crown, a curse, or a wolf. She only wanted her family to survive the winter. Her village had once been peaceful, tucked between quiet hills and a slow river, far from the wars that other packs fought over land and power. But peace never lasted long in a world ruled by wolves. When the Blackthorn pack marched across the border and claimed the land as their own, the terms of surrender were simple and cruel. The debt for peace would not be paid in gold, it would be paid in people. Elena, the eldest daughter of a merchant family that had lost everything in the takeover, was one of 12 villagers handed over to work in the halls of King Cale Ashwood, the Alpha King whose name alone made grown warriors lower their eyes. She left her mother crying at the gate and her younger brother clinging to her sleeve, whispering that she would come back. She promised him she would. She was not sure she believed it herself. The castle of Blackthorn was cold, built from grey stone that never seemed to warm, even in the height of summer. Elena spent her days scrubbing floors, carrying firewood, and learning the two most important rules of her new life: never speak unless spoken to, and never meet the king's eyes. He was said to be dangerous, not cruel without reason, but distant, hardened by years of war and loss. His father had died defending the pack's borders, and some servants whispered that the young king had buried his own heart in that same grave. He ruled with control and discipline, but never with warmth. Servants came and went in his halls, unnoticed, invisible. Elena expected to be no different. For months she was right. Cale barely looked at her. She was simply another quiet shadow moving through his corridors, filling goblets, folding linens, disappearing into corners when his temper flared. She learned to move quickly and silently, the way water moves around stone. Then came the night of the winter feast. The great hall was filled with warriors and nobles celebrating the change of season, firelight flickering against tall windows frosted with ice. Elena had been given the task of refilling the king's goblet, a duty she dreaded, since it meant standing close enough to feel the weight of his presence, cold and commanding even when he said nothing. She approached his seat with careful steps, keeping her eyes low as she had been taught. As she poured the wine, her fingers brushed against his hand. It was the smallest touch, a breath of contact, gone in an instant. But Cale went rigid, as though struck by lightning. The goblet nearly slipped from his grip. His breath caught, sharp and sudden, and his eyes, usually a deep and steady brown, flooded with gold. Something ancient, and long buried inside him, surged forward with a force he had not felt in years. Mate. The word cracked through his mind, like a bell struck too hard, echoing in a place he had thought was silent forever. His wolf, the part of him he had learned to control so completely that he sometimes forgot it lived inside him at all, was suddenly awake, alert, and utterly certain. This was her, the one he had stopped believing existed. Cale rose so quickly that his chair scraped back and nearly toppled. The hall fell silent, all eyes turning toward their king. Elena froze, the wine jug trembling in her hands, terrified she had done something wrong. She had no way of knowing that the terrifying Alpha King, feared across every pack in the region, had just felt his entire world tilt sideways because of her. "Leave us," Cale said, his voice low and strained. "All of you, now." The hall emptied in confused silence, nobles exchanging uneasy glances, servants hurrying out with lowered heads. Elena tried to slip away with them, but Cale's voice stopped her. "Not you." She turned back slowly, heart hammering. She had heard stories of what happened to servants who displeased the king. She braced herself for punishment, for anger, for anything except what actually happened. Cale stood there, staring at her as though seeing her for the very first time. His golden eyes searched her face with a kind of desperate disbelief, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough, almost gentle. "What is your name?" The question caught her off guard. Kings did not usually ask servants for their names. "Elena," she said quietly. "Elena Voss." He repeated it under his breath, like he was trying to memorize the sound of it. Then he shook his head, as though trying to clear his thoughts, and told her she could go. She left the hall confused and shaken, unsure what had just happened, only certain that something had changed. In the days that followed, Kale became a man his own court barely recognized. He, who had always been cold and unreadable, grew watchful and strangely gentle. He began appearing in places he had never bothered with before: the kitchens, the laundry room, the narrow servant corridors, always finding some reason to be near wherever Elena happened to be working. At first, Elena thought she was imagining it. Then she began noticing the way his eyes softened whenever she entered a room, the way his voice lowered when he spoke to her, so different from the sharp commands he gave everyone else. She did not understand it, and it frightened her more than his coldness ever had. She had seen what powerful men did when they decided they wanted something. She had no reason to believe a king would be any different. But Kale did not demand anything from her. Instead, one afternoon, he found her alone in the castle garden, sitting on a stone bench during a rare moment of rest, and he told her the truth. He explained, carefully and without pressure, what a mate bond meant among wolves, a connection deeper than choice, something recognized instantly by instinct, rather than decided by the mind. He told her his wolf had known the moment their hands touched, though his human heart, hardened by years of loss, had taken a little longer to accept it. "You are not my servant," he said quietly. "You never were. If the old stories are true, then I belong to you as much as you might ever belong to me." Elena did not know how to respond. Everything in her life had taught her to distrust kindness from those with power over her. She had seen kings and lords use sweet words to justify cruel intentions. She searched his face for signs of manipulation, for some hidden motive, but found only the same desperate honesty she had seen the night of the feast. "I don't know what you want me to say," she admitted. "You don't have to say anything," Kale replied. "I only wanted you to know the truth. What happens next is your choice, not mine." True to his word, Kale did not push her. Instead, he began quietly undoing the injustice that had brought her to his halls in the first place. Within a week, he cancelled the debt that had forced her village into servitude, returned the lands taken from her family, and ensured her mother and brother received food and supplies through the harsh winter months. He did all of this without asking anything from her in return, without expecting gratitude or affection. Elena watched these changes with growing confusion and slowly, something like hope. She began to see glimpses of the man beneath the crown, someone who had spent so long protecting his people that he had forgotten how to let anyone protect or comfort him in return. One evening, while helping in the kitchens, Elena burned her hand badly on a hot pan. Word reached Kale before she had even finished bandaging it herself. He arrived within minutes, dismissing the healer who came rushing behind him, and knelt down in front of her, taking her injured hand in his with a gentleness that startled her. "Let me," he said softly, and carefully wrapped her hand himself, his brow furrowed with concentration, his usually commanding presence reduced to quiet tenderness. Elena stared at him, this powerful king kneeling before a servant girl, tending to her wound with his own hands, and something inside her began to shift. She realized, watching him, that he was not performing kindness for show. There was no audience, no reason to pretend. He was simply a man who cared, in a way he clearly wasn't used to allowing himself to feel. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "All of it. The debt, my family, this." Kale did not look up right away. When he finally met her eyes, his expression was open in a way she had never seen from him. "Because for years, I told myself that a king cannot afford softness," he said. "That love was a weakness I could not carry alongside the weight of ruling. I buried that part of myself so deep I forgot it existed. And then you walked into my hall, and it woke up whether I wanted it to or not." He paused. "I am not asking you to love me, Elena. I am only asking for the chance to know you as a person, not as someone bound to serve me." Elena felt tears gather in her eyes, though she could not fully explain why. Perhaps it was exhaustion, perhaps it was relief, perhaps it was simply the strange, quiet joy of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in longer than she could remember. "I would like that," she whispered, "the chance to know you." From that day forward, something between them began to grow, slowly and carefully, built not on titles or debts, but on small moments of honesty. Kale taught her about the pack's history, walking with her through the castle halls and telling stories of his father, his childhood, the weight he had carried alone since becoming king. Elena, in turn, shared pieces of her own life, the family she loved, the dreams she had once had before the world took them away. The other servants noticed the change first. Word spread quietly through the castle that the king's mate had been found, and that she was one of their own. Some feared what this meant. Others, watching the way Kale's harsh edges had begun to soften, dared to hope it meant good things for all of them. The pack elders were not so quick to accept it. A council was called, voices raised in debate over whether a servant girl, however chosen by fate, could truly stand beside their king. Kale faced them without hesitation, his voice steady and unwavering. "My wolf chose her the moment we touched," he said. "Not because of her birth or her title, but because something deeper than blood recognized what she is worth. If you cannot accept that, then perhaps you have forgotten what truly makes someone worthy of leading." His words silenced the room. Slowly, one by one, the elders lowered their heads in quiet acknowledgement. Elena, standing at the back of the hall, felt something settle inside her chest. For the first time since she had been taken from her village, she did not feel like a stranger in a world that did not want her. She felt, instead, like she was exactly where she was meant to be. By the time spring arrived, melting the frost from the castle windows and softening the hard edges of winter, Elena stood beside Kale, not as a servant dragged into his halls against her will, but as a woman the entire pack now looked to with respect and quiet awe. The Alpha King's long-lost mate, finally found, finally home. Her mother and brother came to visit not long after, walking through the castle gates not as prisoners or debtors, but as honored guests. Her brother, older now and taller than she remembered, hugged her tightly and whispered that he had known she would come back, just as she had promised. Elena held him close, tears slipping freely down her face, and looked over his shoulder to where Kale stood watching, his golden eyes warm instead of fierce, his powerful frame relaxed in a way she had never seen before. She had come to Blackthorn as a servant forced into a life she never chose. She was leaving that identity behind entirely, stepping instead into a future built on truth, patience, and a bond neither of them had asked for, but both had come to treasure. As the sun set over the castle that evening, painting the sky in soft shades of gold, Elena realized that sometimes the hardest beginnings lead to the most unexpected kind of belonging. She had lost so much to reach this moment, but standing there, surrounded by a family she thought she had lost and a love she never saw coming, she understood, finally, that she had not lost her place in the world at all. She had simply been waiting to find it.